So, okay, we accept.
Dear Dragana, unfortunately, I haven't received any information. I don't think it was my mistake, but anyhow, we are in a very friendly session, not very formal. So perhaps would you mind to present yourself? I'm very sorry to ask
no
you.
Problem. Yes, we also did like that. No problem. Well, I'm full professor at the Political Science Faculty, University of Belgrade. I teach political economy and international political economy, and my area of research for over 30 years is China and East Asia. So this is and also now, because today I'm going to talk about how pandemic influence the Belt and Road Initiative, and to see how a serious challenge it has been so far, how China's partners reacted, what was the reaction of China, of its major corporations that actually realized these that are the main holders of all these projects. So very short about me.
Thank you.
I hope you read the abstract.
Yeah,
no problem. I will just.
The floor is with you, please.
You want a round of introduction first, or as they begin, they can introduce themselves?
Yeah, what do you think, Professor? Each one introduce himself? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it's nice. Less formal. A round of friendship we have here to discuss our common challenges, and so I think it's okay like that. So Dragana, please, you have the floor. I have seen Dimitris is already with us. Excellent. Yeah, okay. So please, Dragana.
So you want me to give my presentation now?
I think so. What do you think?
Yeah, it's okay. Maybe everybody should introduce and then start. But
right, I think that's how we will do, and we will have about 15 minutes each. Okay.
Yes.
And about 12 minutes, we will give you some indication. That you have 3 minutes more.
Excellent.
And at the end of all the presentations, we'll have discussion, questions. Okay.
At the end of all. Okay. Thank you very much.
At the end of all.
It's okay for you to stay till the end. I think so. Yeah. Because the other session is
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
All right. So,
well, as I announced, I'm going to talk about how the Belt and Road Initiative and the ongoing tech war between the United States of America and People's Republic of China during the COVID pandemic influence that realization of Belt and Road Initiative, and how what sort of post-COVID world we will have after this pandemic ends. We are all so much looking forward to it, but because of the deepness and intensity of changes, we could also conclude that the pandemic was a sort of a catalyzer that really influenced societies from within, but also international relations, economic, international, and let's say global change of production and trade. And of course, it has affected the Belt and Road Initiative as well. It has affected relations between the major powers and dynamics of their relationship. And the world, as many have already said, will be sort of a different one after we finish with this pandemic. At the beginning of this pandemic and its outbreak in China, and the fact that it was the second pandemic that outbroke in China during the last 20 years, and the way how Chinese state on different levels handled the epidemic at the beginning and later pandemic that turned into pandemic later, tarnished China's reputation, and for sure China's aspirations of a major country, or its aspirations towards global leadership. And it for sure affected a lot its relations with Western partners, who were very sharp in criticizing China. And we got the outbreak of harsh criticism against China, even some with some racist premises, calling the virus Chinese virus, etc. So at one point, not only Chinese people were, when traveling or doing business, or maybe Chinese people who are citizens of other countries were like targets of such attitude, and all Asian people who like looked like Chinese, etc. So in fear and uncertainties, all these negative aspects of these sharp criticism towards China had its deviations that were seen in different aspects of human communication. Nevertheless, when it comes to major power relations, there were clashes between Australia and China, of course USA, China, because it was a period of the ongoing trade war and the tech war between European Union and China, Canada, China, etc. All, we could say, all Western capitals and China. And China stood back, actually surprisingly violently reacted with, or aggressively reacted with its wolf diplomacy, even attacking certain Western countries, attacking the way how they poorly handled the situation with pandemic, changing that Western narrative with another narrative that was putting China as a capable country that could, after initial mishandling, now very efficiently organize its efforts to contain the virus inside its territory and to organize its economy, being at the central place of the global production of different medical protective devices or assets, and so many medicines. China organized its economy in a way that it was capable to produce enough of all these protective elements and for its domestic needs, and to be able to export it and to donate some of it. So even Jack Ma's foundation and several other foundations in Chinese state engaged massively into helping other countries, and of course into exporting ventilators and these protective clothes, masks, etc., etc., to different countries. Help went to Chinese state organized help went to over 180 states. So actually only countries that have contact with Taiwan were excluded, but everybody else to some extent was included into that, what some were called mask diplomacy. Nevertheless, wolf diplomacy, and even that narrative, new narrative of China with a good Samaritan who was, but also capable state that was able to organize itself to help others to step out as a major power capable to valuable advices how countries should follow China's model in organizing a society and state to fight pandemic. All that was a very disturbing narrative for many Western ears in many Western capitals, but unfortunately in general public, that anti-China sentiment was seen, was very strong, not just in political circles, but in general public, according to several polls that were conducted. Actually, there were clashes between a few African countries and China because of racist incidents in southern China, in which African people who were studying there or working there were targeted as those who introduced the virus in the city or in that particular province, etc. So there were also, that was transferred to diplomatic level, and the official diplomatic complaints of these countries to China, and even African Union as organization for the first time was sent a very strong diplomatic protest to China. China never apologized publicly, but promised to do some investigation and following reactions to that. But to go back to global chains of production and trade, finding China at the core of that chain, at the central with a central place in that chain, many of those capitals now, under the circumstances of a deep political mistrust, even ideological clashes, technological war, lack of trust, many corporations were encouraged by their government to reconsider something that was already happening, and that was Strategy China +1. But Strategy China +1 mostly was created and was slowly performed due to the rising costs of doing business in China and more favorable conditions in rising economies in Southeast Asia. Nevertheless, very slow and expensive process discouraged many of those, but at that time, and because of the even military clashes with India during the pandemic crisis, India strongly encouraged its corporations with a certain fund that should help them to financially support that transfer. And also India, because some producers, actually leading global producers of high technology that were producing in China, moved production, corporations from Taiwan, from Japan, from India, moved production out of China to India, for sure, because also India is a huge market, but also for political and ideological reasons. Chinese government wanted to prevent that and wanted to prevent these incidental, we could say, or separate cases to turn into a wave or trend, because China still needs to be a recipient of foreign direct investments, especially those in technology, area of high technology. And of course, China needs foreign markets, and foreign markets in Western capitals due to pandemic, loss of recession, and just shrinkage of markets for many products. The Chinese export was in jeopardy. The Chinese leadership introduced the dual circulation strategy as a way to continue the previous trends of trying to make China more independent for global market, more resilient but still to get all possible gains from that market and from the openness of other markets, especially big markets like USA, and then European Unions, etc. But without with the full respect for any market.
Yes, Dragana, 3 more minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Western sanctions, especially USA sanctions imposed on big Chinese corporations, state-owned corporations that actually were connected with the militarization of South China Sea, were actually the key players in more than 900 projects along the Belt and Road Initiative. So where they were put on a blacklist, it was a huge challenge, as well as together with pandemic and also that trend of deglobalization, diversification of investments, regionalization that some experts think is here to replace globalization as we know it. But on the other hand, the new technologies and online doing business, then doing trade and other aspects of services in ICT technology actually opened new possibilities, and in many of those industries China was a leader. Also, China built its export in 2020, regardless of the pandemic, and in some ways thanks to pandemic, because as I said, it's a biggest global producer and exporter of a crucial medical equipment and goods and medicines that everybody needs. And China was the only economy with G20 that actually maintained growth in spite of enormous decline of its GDP in the first months of pandemic. So the world after pandemic global economic recovery and growth will be even more dependent on China's resilient economy as its growth engine in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have analyzed both the process within the pandemic period, and you have also anticipated what are the likely trends in the post-COVID situation, particularly in terms of the production chain, the changes that may be brought about, and also the political scenario of the changing relations among the various powers, and how the Belt and Road Initiative has been affected. Thank you very much. That provides us a good beginning. Beatriz, do you think we should ask Dimitris now, or?
I think so, because he was supposed to speak in the first place. Yeah, absolutely.
So Dimitris, please, and begin with introducing yourself in a minute or so, and then make your presentation.
Okay, just a moment. I have to find out how to open this video.
Technical details, yeah.
Yeah.
We are seeing only a half of you. Oh, now it's better.
All right.
Yeah.
How to introduce myself? I don't like introducing myself. Better others speak about it.
Speak about it.
I'm a journalist, a writer. I have done some different things in my life. Anyway, which it will. I don't want to buy into your time explaining them.
All right.
But you have an important publication you are always working on.
Yes, that is true. We have created the site, hoping maybe that it would play a much greater role. Anyway, we try to preserve what we can of critical thinking and our traditions in very changing situations. I participated also in the revolt of my country against the creditors, but unfortunately this it did not turn very well. I have to write a book about it, but it's a subject that I don't like very much, as I have to tell our defeat and our weaknesses. So if you are satisfied with that,
okay.
That will be fine.
Yeah.
So I tried to make to put somehow to speak about the relation between globalization, capitalism, and nationalism. I think I did not speak much of nationalism, finally. I tried to put into context the policies of the dominant powers and the reactions during the last 30 years and the reactions that these policies have provoked in the world. Globalization has dominated somehow the globe as a result of the introduction of capitalism in the ex-Soviet space, which in its turn led to the subsequent and unchallenged global hegemony of the United States and of the international financial capital, a kind of empire of finance, which is rising after 1990. Hidden under this, even before those factors act, there is another process of fundamental importance, which is working for decades already before the Soviet collapse. And it is the more and more pronounced transformation of Western capitalism, which has acquired more radical neoliberal characteristics, leading to the near complete financialization of economy. That is the accumulation of capital more by speculation than by production. Behind it, we have the Hayek's and Friedman's neoliberal projects, which was an answer essentially to the Russian Revolution and to socialism. And it led, and this project was that led subsequently to the gradual growth of the euro markets, the tax havens, productions outsourcing, beginning with the destruction of the Bretton Woods agreements, with the coup d'etat in Chile, which gave the first opportunity to make an experiment of neoliberalism in a country, the deregulation, liberalization, privatization, financialization, and then we have the accumulation of this process with the rise of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan to power, which has accelerated and further radicalized the process. All this process created international conditions which were very favorable for the collapse to the right of the Soviet Union and to the abrupt and catastrophic in economic and social terms introduction of capitalism in the countries of the so-called real socialism. Now, about globalization, it is a very confusing term, and it is used in various and rather confusing ways. I believe that if we want to be based on material and objective realities, we must define it as the project of global, almost unrestrained domination of capitalist relations of production, of distribution, and the accompanying civilization, and of their neoliberal version, to be more precise. All the above, of course, under the ultimate guarantor role of the United States superpower. If this project would succeed, it would mean the absolute domination of financial capital and Western capitalism on the globe, a project by definition totalitarian. It is in this way we must understand the famous formula of Francis Fukuyama about the end of history. The attempt to impose this system on the whole globe has begun in conditions of extreme optimism by the leaders of Western capitalism in 1989-91. But early on, it has begun to meet huge challenges and provoke itself serious crises. A wave of leftist governments took power in different countries of Latin America as a reaction to the previous cycle of neoliberal domination and devastation of the continent. Argentina was obliged to default in the most remarkable failure of the monetarist policy model worldwide. Already in 1997, the same had happened in East Asia and with Russia. It is funny, but this has happened in Russia just 2 months after the head of the IMF had given to the Yeltsin-Chubais government the award of the most effective government worldwide for running its economy. As a result of this failure, Yeltsin was obliged to appoint Primakov as prime minister, thus interrupting for the first time the bananization, so to say, of Russia, and laying the grounds for a partial rehabilitation of the power of the Russian state under Putin. In another case in Eastern Asia, the result of the crisis was the strengthening of the state-centered model of capitalism. In the case of China, it was the complete and unchallenged rejection of the neoliberal instructions, that is, of the Washington consensus. Now the outcome is that in Russia, 25 years after all that, we have some kind of development, at least the stopping the destruction of the Yeltsin years. In China and in East Asia, we have alternative forms of non-capitalist and capitalist development. In the West itself, globalization has provoked also strong social movements against the free trade agreements, which culminated in the social forums with the participation also of people from the South, and also to a generalized putting into question of the new economic and social order. One culminating point of this process was the referendum of 2005 in France, where French people have rejected the project of a European constitutional treaty, and by doing this, they have rejected the Euroliberalism, that is, the particular European version of neoliberalism. On the geopolitical field, things did not go well also. The resistance of especially of the Iraqi people to the invasion has put a break to the neocon plans of Netanyahu, Perl, and Wolfowitz for a quick blitzkrieg in the Middle East, similar to the one which had permitted to Adolf Hitler to occupy all Europe before attacking Soviet Russia. Along with the Iraqi resistance, we have the Afghan resistance, the resistance of the Hezbollah in 2006 war, which inflicted the first military defeat in the history of Israel, and a number of other resistances which of other peoples who resist afterwards. The result of all this was that it gave the possibility to more, so to say, to less extremist forces inside Western imperialism to try to stop at least some of the challenges of the most reckless policies of the Netanyahu faction, like waging a war against Iran and making a new United States military invasion in Syria. Obama did that, and it is to his credit, but he changed half of this course. He stopped the drive to an invasion of Syria and the war of Iran, but he was unable or unwilling of both to revise the whole of the neocon strategy in the Middle East or its extension into the ex-Soviet Union, in Georgia and in Ukraine. Besides, Obama did not have any viable alternative to propose to the Middle East. From the point of view of Western imperialism, the problem in the Middle East can be somehow summarized as follows. You bomb them, they resist. You let them elect their leaders, they elect Hamas or Morsi. Netanyahu's policies provoke Obama's reaction, but as the reaction is not revising but a part of Netanyahu's legacy, then Netanyahu's agenda is re-emerging in much more extremist and dangerous form under Trump. The Trump is representing also a risk because of his reckless policy even for United States capitalism, so they get rid of him and they get Biden in his place. For the time being, the only stable result of Western interventions in the Middle East was to see Russia come back in a region from which it was almost excluded after 1991, and also that we are coming in every stage closer to the possibility of an apocalyptic war in the whole region of the Middle East, with the potential of turning into a nuclear war. Of course, we have also the inverse problem from the point of view of the Arab and the Islamic world. It remains to this moment unable to unite and propose a viable regional, not to mention global, counter-alternative to the imperialist strategies. They are in a position worse than this of Russia, East Asia, China, which try somehow to have some policy, even if they don't have a global vision to counter-oppose to America and the West. In another front, the abolition of the main obstacles to financial speculation was of the main factors that contributed largely to the 2008 economic crisis. In its turn, this crisis has fueled radical social movements, and sometimes with a pronounced national background and a turn to leftist ideas in various regions of the West. It is directly responsible, especially in South Europe, United Kingdom, even in the United States, and has provoked also a big crisis of the European Union, which is the child of globalization par excellence. As we all know, banks are too big to fail. So finance has been able to save itself, and then after saving itself, it has used its crisis in order to advance its agenda of transforming the European Union into a totalitarian structure, in the context of which countries are not so big not to fail.
Dimitris, another 3 minutes, please. Very interesting.
Okay, I will try to summarize the next. So what I wanted to say then, we have a turn to the left which culminates to the Syriza revolt, which gives Corbyn, also Podemos, Mélenchon, Sanders in the United States, but which is going to a defeat everywhere. As the result of this, we have the rise of a sui generis far right, radical right, which is we see in the case of Donald Trump, of Modi in your country, of Boris Johnson, of Bolsonaro in Brazil, of the European far right. Those are different national somehow expressions of the same phenomenon. And this phenomenon, especially in America, it brings very serious similarities, not with the symbols, not exactly with the ideology, but with the historical functions that German National Socialists have played and Italian fascists in the 30s. That is, they tried to use, and they succeeded to some extent, to use the popular discontent, which cannot be expressed by the left in an effective way, in order to create a new ideology, permitting them to realize a very extremist and classical totalitarian program, the one of imposing an authoritarian regime in the West and war in all other directions. What I want to say is that, to conclude, it is that we need absolutely a radical, inclusive, ecological, social, economic, international counter-vision. able to unite the peoples of the South, of the North, of the East, and of the West, and the social, political, and national, so to say, carriers of such a vision. Because if they don't arise in time, we run the risk of falling to one crisis after the other, every one more serious than the previous one. Western capitalism may be unable to dominate the whole world as in the past, but it is probably able to take the whole world with it down, trying to, as it will try to resist its decline. We can say with enough trust that it has entered in its catastrophic phase with known but certainly terrible consequences. The civilization we have built is clearly non-sustainable. We have to replace it before it is too late. By the way, the present day situation is also providing with the movement of non-aligned countries with a great opportunity to play a cardinal role if they take initiatives practical and also in the direction of the in the programmatic field to try to create a global counter force to try to check these catastrophic tendencies.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. I think that's a scenario that is emerging at least during the last 20 years, but exacerbated during the last 1 year during the COVID. And the two most important points, one is about the flashpoints, the Middle East situation becoming more tense with new intensities of right-wing development. And then the crisis in finance capital, not seeing the kind of counter. I mean, you did mention several new forces, China, Russia, and the new movements and so on. But I think we have an opportunity from the NAM tradition to organize a global counter force to respond to this version of capitalism. Thank you very much. Well, we have two more speakers. Who will go first, Beatriz or Rita?
I don't see here the fourth, but Rita is definitely with us since the first moment. I think she would have the floor.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Rita Manchanda. Rita, welcome. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Welcome. I could introduce you, but since we are following a certain norm, I will request you to tell about your work in a minute or so.
Yeah. Shall I, please let me know when to start?
Yeah, start please now.
Okay, fine. Well, since we are introducing ourselves, I'm a policy analyst, I'm a consultant, I'm an author, a researcher. My areas are human rights, with particular attention to peace and conflict areas in the region of South Asia. And I have over the last 20 years been working on bringing in gender into security issues, feminizing security, and in particular, bringing in a South Asian narrative to the women, peace and security discourse. In fact, I am going to draw a leaf from a lot of that work. What I would like to do right from the beginning, thank you firstly for, and I'm glad that it's an informal conversation and I will address it as that. First is, I mean, there's been a lot of talk, and thank you, Dimitris, if I may use your first name, for in fact mapping out a very grim COVID future, which I in fact share as well. And I would like to say that since it is likely that we are going to see greater authoritarianism, greater inequalities, greater strain on the UN system. Already it is under strain, greater weakness, as well as in terms of multilateral functioning. So it's within this that I want to, in fact, suggest the possibility of, in fact, new openings, new opportunities. You did mention NAM, that is the non-aligned movement. I would rather hook my presentation with the Bandung spirit, because, well, NAM suggests very much an interstate body. And since I am located in civil society, I feel happier talking about the Bandung spirit. And for me, the Bandung spirit means contesting global hegemonies. The social order in which these international hierarchies are rooted, the norms, the values, and in particular, the knowledge system, has in fact really underpinned this hierarchical, unequal international system, as well as I mentioned, the social values that adhere to it, social values which are actually not even the legacy, which are imperialist values. And I will elaborate on that. I want to bring in now a feminist perspective. And when I say feminism, I'm talking about global feminism, transnational feminism, plural feminism, no such thing as one particular feminism. And I want to use that perspective to, in fact, analyze, and for analytical purposes, the women, peace, and security discourse. But before I do that, and I think it's important, particularly as I'm arguing for the value and the relevance of, in fact, transnational cooperation, transnational dialogues, transnational sharing, to, in fact, recover some of the earlier histories of, in fact, the huge advances made in the Afro-Asian mobilization of women, the anti-imperialist mobilization, and right from, in fact, even before Bandung. And that is, I know there is a session devoted to gender. And in fact, I was delighted that I wasn't siloed into gender. This is the 1945 Beijing Conference of Asian Women. There are the Afro-Asian conferences. There is the 1961 Cairo Conference. All these were, in fact, conferences that contested the dominant knowledge discourse that, in fact, introduced and very contentiously state feminism. But it also, and there was no, I would, in fact, argue that recently there's been a lot of literature that has come out on these movements. In particular, I want to quote Chiara Bonfigliaio, God, I hope there's no one Italian here, as well as Lois West, Elizabeth Armstrong. Yes, most of these women are actually all located in the West, but nonetheless, it is to their work that one turns to excavate actually the kind of momentum that was, or rather the progress that was made, the kind of arguments that were put forward. Of course, there was state feminism, there was also social reform feminism, but there was also left feminism, which had very much to do with the linkages of gender, anti-imperialism, anti-fascist movements, and bringing in centrally, of course, the issue of development, but development which wasn't, in fact, which was conceptualized in a very challenging way of that self-determination must be also self-determination of socio-economic regimes, of independent, non-exploitative regimes. And you find the socioeconomic dimension was central to the way that, in fact, feminists were arguing or articulating their point of view. I want to here just quote, in fact, a Sri Lankan feminist who has made a huge impact, who continues to influence us, and that is Kumari Jayawardene, whose book is Women in Third World Feminisms, or Third World Nationalism, sorry. and in which he argues that one of the particular characteristics of movements in our part of the world was that they were so they were nested, or they were embedded actually in larger struggles for social justice, for political rights, and so forth. These were not movements that were siloed. Now, if you look at, and this is the time when you have second wave feminism emerging, where very much to do with autonomy of the body, autonomy of the self, autonomy from the state. Here, in fact, you have a very, very different kind of discourse, very much located with movements for social justice, broader movements, which were part of the nationalist struggle. Also, it meant also a much more intricate, ambivalent, but nonetheless interdependent relationship with the state. And that is the post-colonial state. So what I think what is important is to recover some of this kind of momentum, some of this kind of history, which was actually invisibilized. It's been extremely difficult for many of the authors that I quoted earlier for them to, in fact, do this work, because a lot of the archives have been destroyed. I mean, they've been victims, in a sense, or hostage to Cold War history. I mean, we seem to forget that even in the analysis of the Conference on Women, whether it's Mexico, whether it is Copenhagen, whether it is Nairobi, a lot of this history is actually written from a very, very, I really feel uncomfortable using big words like Western, but it's certainly not from a Southern Global South perspective. And Chiaro Bonafiglialo's work in particular tries to unpack, in fact, the nature of the debate, the split between the Western feminist movement, the socialist women, as well as women coming from the third world. I don't think one wants to consolidate these into hard categories. These are more like streams and fluid streams. And I think that would probably be a more appropriate way to address it. But she does demonstrate how, in fact, whether it was Copenhagen or whether it was the entire decade, you see, in fact, these different voices creating oppositional meaning to, in fact, what was the dominant feminist discourse. And for me, very much Bandung spirit represents, in fact, this kind of alternative pathway, alternative knowledge, creation, alternative norms and values that are in fact being engaged with. One would probably say they were being promoted. The argument that I want to pick up is that there was space, there was opportunity for creating a different kind of dialogue, for, in fact, alternative dialogues. And it was very much a transnational dialogue of women across borders, women both at the level of the state, but also at the level of civil society. I think we forget that during the run-up to the World Conference on, not only the World Conferences on Women, but also the Human Rights Conference, the Racism Conference, there was a great deal of interaction, but because there was also funding for it, and at that point of time, the rights agenda was very strong. There was a great deal of interaction amongst women within the region. I mean, if I'm talking about South Asia, but also Asia, Asia Pacific, Afro-Asia, within Africa, a lot of that, in fact, produced a great deal of energy, of advances, of challenges to, in fact, the dominant Western epistemological discourse. And of course, in a sense, its hypothesis was 1995 Beijing. Continuation of that was, in a sense, and because you have you had Yugoslavia, you had Rwanda, you had very much this concern about internal civil conflicts, the role of gender in these internal civil conflicts, the importance of gender, the importance of, in fact, mass systematic sexual violence, and which in a sense was the path that led to the adoption by the UN Security Council. For the first time, the Big Boys Club adopts a resolution that is thematic and it is concerned with women, peace, and security, UN Resolution 1325. But you know, if you look at now the way the history of this resolution is written, it's very much a product, it is argued, and certainly the text seems to suggest is that it was a product of international civil society networks located in Geneva, located in Paris, located in London, located in New York. And what it seems to elide, or what it seems to obscure, is the huge contribution of women from Africa, women from Asia, women from Latin America. Now, just in terms of, say, South Asia, there is this very interesting chapter called Her Story in a book I've edited, and in which the women who were actually part of that process, the feminists who were part of that process from Sri Lanka, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from India, and Nepal, got together in a conversation and talked about their particular contribution. They talked about their particular unhappiness.
Rita, you have 3 more minutes, please.
Okay, let me just be very quick about this. They talked about their reservations and in particular their unhappiness with, in fact, a resolution that was going to be located in the UN Security Council. And in fact, this is in the thread that I would like to pull together. You also had in Namibia, you had a seminar which resulted in the Windhoek Declaration, and you had the Namibian Plan of Action. A lot of that is completely obscured in the history of how this resolution came about. Now, I want to just pick up one of the problems, as I said, with locating it in the Security Council and with the Women, Peace and Security resolution, which requires rescripting, reanalyzing to make it, in fact, more relevant to people in where the actual conflicts are taking place, is the whole issue of militarization and, in particular, responsibility to protest. Over the last few years, one is seeing the streaming and convergence of the WPS declaration and the responsibility to protect. Foreign intervention, and I don't need to, I think, underline this, has always been an issue which has been central to the NAM critique and central to NAM's concern, non-aligned movements concerns. And you find that here, there is the use of gender and the legitimation, the use of the WPS resolution to actually, or discourse rather, to justify the foreign intervention, whether it is Afghanistan, whether it is Iraq, and now, as I said, in this very formal way in which these two resolutions, these two discourses are being converge, responsibility to protect as well as this. Now, who are they protecting? Once again, you're falling back on protecting brown women from brown predators, that is brown men, and who is protecting them? White experts, white white people. So once again, you're getting a framework which is extremely, colonial, which is steeped in imperialism. So I know I have to conclude, so let me just sum up, and which is the importance of, in fact, reviving some of our transnational connections, of, in fact, re-energizing and using that energy to reimagine, to bring back the transformative agenda, which was to have been at the center of this project of gender equality, of emancipation, of peace and security and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this is a dimension.
Excellent. Yeah,
Excellent.
excuse me. May I ask Rita to write in the chat the name of those books and authors? I'm very interested. Thank you. Excuse me, I interrupt you.
No.
Rita, you should write a book about the history. It is not enough to say it is hidden. You know it, so you must write a book. And even now you have to write an article for Defend Democracy Press. Huh?
Okay.
Yes. You know that, Rita. You know that Dimitris is the editor and the main force who produces the Defense Democracy Press.
You permit me 15 seconds.
Yeah, all right.
No, okay.
No. 15 seconds.
All right. Then, you know something. Ancient Greeks have constructed their word for truth from A and Lethe, which means no oblivion.
Okay.
Not to forget the
No,
important and the main and important things. Of course, you have to forget other things, not to become like the Bourbons, who never learned and never.
Thank you. And if we put all this in the context of what women went through during the last 1 year in all the countries during the COVID, they make so much sense, and we can visualize what dimension it adds to a post-COVID transformative world that we have in mind.
Thank you.
Well, I think Beatriz now has to come in with the voice
I think
to be heard.
I think that the fourth speaker, Sifa Mandia, I'm not seeing her. Am I wrong? I think she's not here with us. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't see her. Yeah. I think we have a space for debate, which is always important.
Sorry?
Perhaps we can open the floor for the debate, because I think we don't have.
Are you not going to speak in this session, Beatriz?
I was supposed to speak in the other, but I can bring my speech here, no problem.
The program shows it here, but maybe in the new program.
No. Oh, I see. So no problem. I have some ideas and I can share now, of course. Yeah, perfect. For me, do you think it's better? Perhaps, yeah. Because in the others,
we have 20 minutes, so we can devote to discuss.
I don't know. As you prefer.
Let us then have a discussion on 3 very important papers.
But anyhow, as you prefer, Manu.
Yeah.
What do you think? It's better.
I think then you come in the next session, okay?
In the next, in my program, it was like that.
Okay.
I didn't realize that there was a change.
No, that is fine. That is fine.
Okay.
So we had, one paper on the great powers and their dynamics and what was happening. Between China and the US and the world, referring to the BRI and the production chain and the political scenario accompanying that during the COVID period. Then the larger systemic trends and the crisis and contradictions in capitalism, Dimitris presented before us. Which become the overall framework to analyze these problems and envisage a future. And then Rita, on the gender, peace and security, really presented all the inequality and oppression related issues which gender demonstrates. When we talk, and to Dimitris's frame of what capitalism under neoliberalism has done, they, the way they address gender issue, the neoliberal capitalist framework addresses gender, race, caste, ethnicity, religion, these issues. They have actually defied the historical trends of anti-colonial struggle aspirations, Bandung spirit, and NAM perspective, because they exacerbate inequalities and alienation on all those fronts. Therefore, the three together present us, and these we will carry forward in the next session. But so there are many interesting questions which may arise. Therefore, I will now invite questions from the floor. Then I will also ask some questions myself later on. Who will start?
Yeah, I myself. I think we have a common diagnosis of the present times. Capitalism has no answers for the challenges we are facing as human beings, as the whole society. But till now, we haven't been able to propose the alternatives that could capture the hearts and minds of people. Yeah, I think there are very interesting experiences and female experiences particularly, but we still are lack the possibility to broaden and to capture more participants for these alternative ways to organize our society. And this is particularly challenging for the post-COVID world, because the scenario is that you have demonstrated very stark, and we can't be very positive or very altruistic in this short-term scenario. But in the long term or medium term, I think there are very object alternatives in appearing. Well, as a transitional moment, we are incapable. We have no capacity to see clearly where are we going. But as we have one very clear perspective, that is the destruction of human life in our planet, and not only human, but the collapse of life. I think in this case, I should say there is no alternative, not in Margaret Thatcher's way of saying it, but on the contrary, there is no alternative but to be courageous enough to join forces to construct an alternative to capitalism. Right. And I think this is the key issue.
So questions, comments, especially those who have not spoken. Otherwise, the panelists can ask to each other. Somebody can start.
Yes, I would like to put a question.
Okay, please,
to Rita.
Dimitris.
Now the Western left, in particular, is facing some problems. I mean, in 1968, it was very revolutionary to speak about women's rights. It remains to an extent, and even more to speak about the rights of homosexuals. Now we are witnessing strange things. those slogans, when they appeared in the West, in the context of a revolutionary upheaval and of struggles for freedom in general, which characterized the period from 1965 to 1970, so to say, with a culmination in May 1968, had a liberation character. If you were saying to the young people revolted in May 1968 that you want for homosexuals to be married, they would laugh, because they were thinking that marriage is a form of oppression, not of liberation. And I don't know what would be the reaction to the project of having children adopted by homosexuals. Especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Western left has substituted to a great extent the ideology of socialism with the ideology of human rights, understanding them in a sense which is not very different from the neoliberal one. That is, individuals can do whatever they want. This is the real content of freedom, and it is not related to any social condition.
Okay. Yeah.
So how we face those problems nowadays? I mean, what we're doing, because they are provoking huge political results. The far right everywhere is occupying, is trying to defend, so to say, traditional values, and it is exploiting the exaggeration of such demands, which represent mainly, by the way, middle social strata in society.
Okay. It's not a liberation framework, it's a human rights framework. And according to Dimitris, that is a neoliberal framework. Do you agree?
No. I did not say exactly that. But I said that there is a clear difference between understanding the realization of human rights in the framework of a society or as an individual. The French Revolution was saying equality, freedom, fraternity, but it was saying all the three of them, not the one against the other.
Yeah,
exactly. So there is a neoliberal approach to human rights. There is a socialist approach to human rights. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
okay, Rita.
You know, I mean, if I may just pull out something, which is, I think, your emphasis on the individual and the focus on guaranteeing individual rights, which has, in a sense, displaced the whole issue of class. I mean, today. And I think it is very much an intergenerational thing. It's something that I have confronted sometimes very uncomfortably, which is the whole LGBTI discourse. I'm not saying it's not valid, of course it is, but you have the displacement of funding, of support, away from, in fact, these, say, issues of socioeconomic justice towards, and I think it is not an innocent diversion. I'm not going to say, it's not an innocent streaming. You know, I don't want to fall into the trap of saying I don't believe in it. Of course, it's an important agenda, but the way this agenda seems to have displaced everything else is, I think, not an innocent, it's not innocent and incidental. It's very much by design that today it's extremely difficult. Say, if you are discussing contemporary feminisms, you will find that 80% of it might just get dominated by the LGBTI discourse. And there will be, in fact, 20% left to talk about issues of social rights, issues of justice, issues of the larger struggles that today, particularly in Asia and Africa, we are facing. And
Yeah.
so I agree with you. It has been an extremely difficult challenge because you cannot go against it. It would be politically so totally incorrect. But yes, it's not innocent the way it's begun to dominate and is then now the target of the far right and other issues which really should be commanding attention do not do so and get no support.
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to add, if I may, like women mutilation or child marriages, sex slaves. It's all horrible and all present every day. And I think efforts should be united to fight it, because only systemically, because they require changes of whole societies. So huge efforts to have any result.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add a comment in relation to this very important point, and is in particular in Brazil, the discussion about racism. It's the same. Racism is not put on the table in this moment as part of a system, of oppressive system that started with colonialism and continues with imperialism and continues with the essence of capitalism. But on avoiding this kind of addressing the problem is also the same, is, I think, very empty of or more deep content. And so I agree perfectly. It's difficult to explain this. I see this with my students, the importance to connect this kind of discrimination with the whole system that oppressed society. So I think you are right, Rita, when you say it is an intergeneration problem of dialogue, I think, because our experiences, at least in Latin America, our experience in our generations was very clearly the confrontation with the system through political struggle, armed struggle, trade union struggle. See, nowadays the youth is willing to struggle, but the objective of the struggle is not correctly directed. They are really delinking
Absolutely.
the essential question. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it is a problem of political consciousness.
Absolutely.
And in this sense, we have nowadays the media, the social media, the social networks. Everything is avoiding the deep question, how to address these problems, correctly, to overcome this.
I have a question to Dimitris, not a question really. This you mentioned the sui generis right to identify this phenomenon of Trump, Bolsonaro, Modi, and the like. Do you think this is a very recent phenomenon, or it has its antecedents and it has been evolving for quite some time?
Yes, it is an old phenomenon. It draws upon national traditions. For example, in the United States, we have a tradition of white supremacy. We have a tradition. Many Americans, especially white Americans, they believe that they are identified with the project of a United States empire ruling the world and getting benefits from that, and all that. There is now the possibility to develop a political movement which is not based on the past. But still, in that case, I believe it has a new qualitative phenomenon. It is one of the answers of capitalism and imperialism to its crisis. They cannot afford anymore. For instance, the main globalizers scenario was that they will be able to dominate their societies and their whole world by the means by their financial means and by the power of the Western example. They failed. So they have to invent something else, because otherwise they have the risk. By the way, it is quite significant, I believe, that the United States capital began to move massively to support Biden only after they had defeated Sanders, because then they did not have a threat which, or at least a movement which could be perceived as a threat to their system. And then they did not need any more Trump. Trump obviously did not grasp the moment, and this is why he had this adventures afterwards. And this was the so we have two different plan A and plan B for the domination. Both of them have totalitarian characteristics. When they use those methods against Trump by banning him in Facebook, etc., or what Macron is doing in France, it is clearly a turn to authoritarian methods everywhere in the world. But the difference is that Trump is maybe going to a more traditional, something which is resembling to the National Socialist experiment in Germany, and the others are more, how to say, they are more attracted by some kind of postmodern totalitarianism, if you permit me the expression. I don't know also how to define them exactly, because it is a new phenomenon, all that.
It is,
Yeah.
May I ask a question to Dragana? Now, the basis of China's image building and success in getting a lot of support internationally, is it China's technological advance? Is it also use of Chinese material resources, including capital, finance capital, or is it mainly political management? What is the basis of Chinese success internationally? Dragana, are you there? Did you get my question? Is she there or no?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Oh,
here.
Oh yeah,
she's there.
she's there.
I'm here.
Did you get my question?
No, sorry. Could you please repeat? Because
Yeah. I wanted to get your view on the basis of Chinese success internationally. Is it the use of technology and sharing that technology internationally as an alternative to America-based technological power, or is it finance capital, or is it political management? You also focused on the actual material help in times of need, like COVID. So how do you assess the basis of Chinese success in terms of gaining influence in different parts of the world?
Well, it's a very, very complex question, of course, and the answer should be like that. But anyway, I have to simplify it for sure, because Chinese model is sort of unique one. because resources that China have are a unique one. You have a communist party that is capable to put under its control the whole society and to focus the resources of the whole society into certain economic goals, if these economic goals are top priorities, if some others, of course, to refocus on those others. So China has managed to achieve advanced positions in different areas of high technology, not in some others that is still very dependent on the global leaders of such technologies coming from USA, Taiwan, Japan, and other major technological powers. But still, in some other areas, it's a leading player. And wherever it's a leading player, it also opened China a very unique opportunity to set it's a normal power across Belt and Road Initiative. Wherever you have Chinese technology, Chinese corporations, Chinese hardware and software, you also have Chinese normative power, how these new technologies are going to be used. Because before, China was excluded, other major powers, of course, defined all areas, including that particular one. So now I think the Chinese leaders are focusing countries' resources into gaining certain technologies and transforming those technologies into normative power in these high-tech industries areas. So because who make those standards, who set those standards rule the world? Because now we are using like our laptops or desktops and using certain software, and all these standards are set by those corporations. If China has its own corporations, its own product that we are all going to use, like smart cities, smart this and that, then China will be that future ruler or master of our future world through technologies. So
yeah,
but also
thank you. We have been now warned to conclude because
yes, thank you.
yeah, they are the technical staff are saying we have only some minutes left because we have to return to the main room.
Yeah,
So to allow to create the new rooms. Yeah.
okay, thank you very much. And we will have a report. Beatriz, I hope you will take that.
I have taken notes, and this very, very important discussion. I'm very happy. Thank you very much for all of you, Rita, Dragana, Dimitris, excellent, your presentations. And I hope we will have all of you in the second session, which is a continuity of this one. It would be a pleasure because we can join the discussion with you. That will be excellent. So thank you very much. I think we have to leave. Of course, Diana, Martin, all the other colleagues who are with us here are also invited to continue with us, please.
In the next session, yeah.
In next session, yeah, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
See you later.